So this is the bear spray, huh? What am I just like spray it at the face of the bear? Hey guys, I'm Max and welcome back to Hot Ones. So I just got back from a trip to Glacier National Park, which is located in northern Montana in the Cascade Mountain Range and actually borders Waterton Lakes National Park in Canada. Before I left, I struggled a little bit with which watch to bring. See, I didn't want to take anything expensive or flashy, and at the same time, I didn't want to take any of my delicate vintage pieces. But I did want something a little bit nicer than the Casio that I was already packing. And so I eventually settled on this limited edition Lorier Gemini that I recently purchased. And this got me thinking more about microbrands as a category. If you're not familiar, microbrands tend to be small, sort of startup watch companies, and behind them are often passionate watch enthusiasts with deep knowledge about horology. The ones that come to mind include Baltic, Lorier, Den Henry, and the like. Unlike the big brands, microbrands often can take more risks, and at least the ones that I like tend to take cues from the past and combine them with modern components, all for quite a reasonable price. Well, this sounds great, but can you really have your cake and eat it too? Today we're going to try to find out by looking at this Lorier Gemini. But first, let me show you some scenes from the trip. The Gemini is Lorier's first venture into chronographs. Founded in New York City just a few years ago, Lorier has made a name for itself, assembling attractive, reasonably priced watches, drawing on inspirations from vintage designs. And as you'll see, in this watch we find elements from famous chronographs of the past. The Lorier Gemini comes in classic panda and reverse panda colorways. However, what we have here is neither of those, but a limited edition collaboration between Lorier and Worn & Wound. A striking cerulean blue flows over the style, atop of which pops a burnt yellow arrow tip of the chronograph hand, which you might recognize the shape of. It is reminiscent of the ones found on the Paul Newman era Daytonas. The bracelet reminds me of vintage flat link ones found on early Speedmasters. Of course, in this modern rendition, it has a lot less rattle and features a milled double deployant clasp, an admirable feat considering the watch's price point. And the interesting choice of a single white subdial gives the watch a distinct asymmetric character. Lorier's signature small arrow hour hand again makes it onto this model. The watch has some pleasant dimensions, with a diameter of 39mm and a reasonable thickness at just 13. Lug to lug is a manageable 47mm, and it has a ubiquitous lug width of 20. The caseback commemorates this collaboration with an engraving symbolizing the Gemini constellation. Underneath it, we find the Chinese-made Seagull ST19 movement, which admittedly is not terrible to look at, and though a bit unrefined, more than gets the job done for a $500 mechanical chronograph. The start-stop action is not the most crisp and requires a bit of force, but resetting feels positive and snappy. Now, this isn't the first Lorier that I've owned. I've actually had the Neptune, both versions 1 and 2 in the past. And one thing I've always complained about with those older models, actually directly to the owners, Lorenzo and Lauren, on the forums, was just how thick they were. Back then, the watches used the NH35 movement from Seiko, and I'm really happy that they've responded to our complaints. Speaking of which, I really enjoy connecting with you guys, whether that's down in the comments below or over on Instagram. You know, during a time of isolation like this, it's such a gift to be able to build community with other watch lovers. So if you enjoy videos like this, you can help us out by clicking the subscribe button below. You can do that while you watch, and this way you'll also get a reminder next time an episode drops. Okay, so why did they name a vintage-inspired chronograph the Gemini? When it comes to spaceflight, the Apollo program gets all the hype, and the Hollywood blockbusters. But before the glamour of sending Tom Hanks around the moon, NASA had to first catch up with the Russians around the orbit of the Earth. After all, you don't just go from a fancy speech to landing a man on the moon without a few shakedown runs in between. Flown between 1965 and 1966, the Gemini program, named for its two-person capsules, launched missions around the Earth as preparation for the eventual moonshot. Gemini missions were employed to help astronauts experience prolonged periods in space, practice extravehicular activities, aka spacewalks, and train in docking maneuvers important for the eventual Apollo missions. Because of the sheer complexity that a moon mission would require, all these things needed to be practiced in isolation. For example, for two spacecrafts to dock with each other in orbit, you can't simply speed one up to meet the other. This would cause the craft to go into a higher orbit, missing its target entirely. The astronauts soon learned that the best method for such a maneuver is to first descend into a lower orbit, then slowly decrease the orbital speed to meet its counterpart. Talk about figuring things out on the fly. Drawing on the importance of this obscure NASA program lost to the history books makes wearing the Gemini somehow just that bit more meaningful. The watch is surprisingly versatile and takes on a more relaxed and casual flavor on a strap, belying what its punchy colors would have you believe. Great watches make purposeful, sometimes controversial design choices, and the Gemini is not without these. Attributes such as the oversized crown used to manually wind the movement and the comparatively tiny pump pushers for chronograph operation are some of these. The boxed acrylic crystal adds a touch of old-school distortion, and the brushed stainless steel bezel is firm with no play on center. Its function useful for tracking a second time zone. All of these quirky attributes combine to give this watch a dynamism that is rarely found in the Microbrands space. The design decisions as well as the aptly placed historical reference allows the Gemini to stay interesting and relevant, and be more than just the brief fling that most watches at this price point can muster. So, in summary, I really think Lorier knocked this one out of the park. The watch manages to be at once masculine but also elegant, and draws on elements from the greatest hits from chronographs past. But at the same time, they were able to add enough differences to make it not feel like a homage. And so we get back to the original question, which is, are Microbrands worth your money? And I think in this case, the answer is a resounding yes. I mean, you can't really beat this watch for the value, but that's the key here, is for the money. Because by going with a microbrand, you are foregoing certain things. For example, you are not getting the provenance associated with centuries of watchmaking history, They often have to cut costs somewhere, and that's manifested in the movements that are off the shelf and oftentimes less refined. And when you get to the microscopic level is really where the big names begin to pull away a little bit in terms of the finishing and the machine tolerances and such. Well, anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. So thank you for watching. Until next time, take care.